In a similar vein, the UNODC wrote earlier this year that organised crime seems now to be less a matter of a group of individuals who are involved in a range of illicit activities and more a matter of a group of illicit activities in which some individuals and groups are presently involved. If these individuals are arrested and incarcerated, the activities continue because the illicit market and the incentives it generates remain. Strategies aimed at the groups will not stop the illicit activities if the dynamics of the market remain unaddressed. The Europol Charter itself also underlines the move towards a primary focus upon the effects of crime rather than on who is undertaking the activity. The Europol decision, which was formally proposed by the European Commission in 2006 and agreed in 2007-8, focused not on organised crime, i.e. how criminality is conducted, but rather on serious crime, who and how it harms. And this is reflected in the Europol Charter. Because it looks at issues of demand and supply, market dynamics and vulnerabilities in the commodity chain, market-based analysis permits law enforcement and policy agencies to be proactive rather than reactive. Project Stop in Australia is a good domestic example of the application of market-based analysis. Closely monitoring the distribution of pseudoephedrine at legitimate points of sale is having an impact on how amphetamine is produced by many market participants and a greater effect on the market than arrests of individual offenders. Another example of the difference in effect of targeting a market dynamic rather than market participants is the MDMA market in Australia. There have been a series of detections of large MDMA importations over the past decade, and a number of alleged importers have been arrested. But this had a limited medium to long-term effect on the domestic MDMA market. However, the worldwide clampdown on the precursor chemical MDP-2P, based on market analysis, has had a devastating impact on domestic supplies of MDMA, not just in Australia, but in most countries. Unless crime networks have a link to supplies of Safrole, which itself is a market dynamic, they can't produce MDMA to meet demand. Hence, there is a happy symmetry between the international literature and the practice of law enforcement in relation to the importance of market-based assessments for proactive policing. I'd like to turn now to whether there's advantage in producing an omnibus assessment of crime markets and crime groups as opposed to treating the two concepts as distinct. The short answer, in my view, is no. Why? The ACC believes it's better that organised crime be assessed separately from both a group and market perspective. The OCTA deals with crime markets and enabler activities, whereas the Commission's National Criminal Target Report, NCTR, which my colleague Jane O'Neill will discuss in a minute, focuses upon the threat and risk posed to Australia by individuals and groups who engage in serious and organised crime. There is, logically, a clear distinction between the risk assessment methodologies employed in the OCTA and the NCTR, and a focus upon different drivers and dynamics. A risk methodology for the OCTA is going to be enhanced for the OCTA 2012 version to also encompass a sector lens, which will permit us to triangulate the group and market assessment with an analysis of key sectors in which organised crime has an impact. A risk methodology which focuses solely upon the actions of individuals and groups, while valuable in identifying who to target, cannot provide a meaningful picture of crime markets or provide insight into emerging crime markets or issues, such as high-tech crime in the analogues market, where there is a significant risk but very limited organised criminal involvement, as that concept is generally understood. Conversely, a risk methodology that focuses solely upon crime markets cannot identify which particular groups to target within those markets, because it necessarily takes an aggregated view of criminal activity in the markets. It follows that there is a need for two complementary assessments of crime markets and organised crime entities using separate methodologies designed for those purposes. Both assessments should be considered together as part of a suite of intelligence products, which the ACC calls its picture of criminality. Overseas examples of assessments which have endeavoured to merge a discussion of crime markets and crime groups have invariably done so by drawing broad brushstrokes and making sweeping statements to reduce the length of the document. This has led to a level of criticism that the conclusions drawn are not supported by the content of the documents or represent a simplification of the real-world situation. The ACC seeks to avoid this criticism by producing distinct assessments which are designed to provide sufficient detail to explain the assessments which have been made. A recent Scottish research project which reviewed law enforcement approaches to assessing the risk posed by organised crime in the United Kingdom came to a similar conclusion. The authors, Neil Hamilton Smith from the University of Stirling and Simon Mackenzie from the University of Glasgow, concluded that comprehensive organised crime risk assessments need to be informed by multiple products, including analyses of trends in both licit and illicit market structures and the changing regulatory and control environments that are critical in framing opportunities for organised crime in the first place. They also found that if the rigour of United Kingdom risk assessments are to be strengthened, and if the assessments are truly to stimulate innovative policing, then it is essential that these complementary forms of assessments are generated routinely, along with assessments which map crime groups. The OCTA and the NCTR, like similar assessments overseas, have different primary clients and stakeholders and serve different purposes. In simple terms, the OCTA primarily serves policy clients, while the NCTR serves operational clients. The distinction has been neatly summarised by Dr. Nicholas Dawn of Cardiff University. Dawn argues that criminal organisation remains of considerable and entirely legitimate concern at an enforcement operational level, since it determines what policing methods are to be employed. At policy level, however, a managerialist approach holds sway, within which categories of crime are prioritised for action, and the decision is how intensely to police, on the basis of attributions of seriousness. In reality, although the clients who receive, consider and act upon the OCTA and the NCTR may in some cases be located in the same agency, they are rarely the same persons, and there are some agencies which receive one assessment but not the other. This factor is crucial in determining whether to produce an omnibus assessment. There are also challenges around sharing operational intelligence in non-operational agencies. The ACC's view is that the best solution to these dilemmas is to have distinct assessments which deal with the separate subject matter and imperatives. Thank you very much.